Hi, this is Jeff with Slavens Racing, and this video is about how to serve the inner cartridge on a twin chamber or closed chamber or bladder fork, whatever you want to call it, that's on the new XC and SX and SXF models on KTMs. This fork came out in 2007 on the 250SX, and since then it's been in 08. They came out on the XC models. So it's the closed chamber fork. So first of all, people get confused on what fork they have. So let's figure that out first. So if your fork has a fork cap on it that looks like this, it requires a big wrench like this to work on it. That's a closed chamber fork, also known as a twin chamber or a bladder fork. It's called a bladder fork because it has a bladder inside. Here's a rubber bladder. That's why it's called a bladder fork. It's a closed chamber. So back down here. So, if you're still confused about what you have, this is an open chamber fork. That's what the fork cap looks like on an open chamber. This is the newer style open chambers. This has an adjustable rebound on it, right? Or adjustable preload, excuse me. This nut right here is where you would adjust the preload. This is an open chamber fork. This video is not about open chamber forks. It's about closed. This is also an open chamber fork. This is an earlier style. This is still used on 690 KTMs, but as far as the other dirt bike models, it was I believe 06 and earlier they used this style fork cap. So if you have this fork cap or this fork cap, you're watching the wrong video. Set those aside. So in order to work on the inner chamber of this fork, first, in order to get the inner chamber out, you'll have to watch our other video on how to change fork springs on a closed chamber fork. That will show you how to get the inner cartridge out. So, but to work on the inner cartridge, you need a little hand pump like this with a needle on it. We're going to be selling these real soon on our website, slavensracing.com. You need a Phillips screwdriver. This is called the compression tool. That fits right here on the bladder assembly so that you can unscrew the bladder. This bladder fits in this hole here. And you need one of these wrenches, but that's on the previous video. You also need a 2.5mm Allen, and that's about all you'll need. This is a way for home tuners to do it. This is not exactly the way we do it here. We have a vacuum machine here that we use to do this, but this is a very reliable second option. This is very easy to do it this way at home, or for some of you guys that are starting out in the suspension business or other shops that can't afford a machine. This is a good way to do it. It's not the best way. The best way is with the vacuum machine. So from there, you want to use your compression tool on this, unscrew it from the cartridge. This just pulls out. This cartridge is full of oil, and it's got new oil in it, so I'm not going to dump it. But anyhow, you pull the bladder assembly out, dump the oil out of this cartridge. Then from there you should actually remove the spindle. This is called the spindle. Just take this nut off the end of it here, and then you can push the spindle up through the cartridge and pop it out. That way you can thoroughly clean everything inside, including the valving stack that's in there. So this is what a spindle looks like. And in order to get them back in, it takes either a special tool to compress this piston band around here, or a little home method would be just to put a O-ring around it. So you can just put an O-ring on top of that piston band. And you can put the piston band on a T-handle. Then you can slide it down inside, back down inside of the cartridge. Now the piston band will pop off and slide down your T-handle as the band goes in, as the piston goes into the proper location. So that's just another Little trick so that you don't have to buy another special tool. Just put an O-ring around the piston band, then you can slide it in. After you have that in there, then it's time to fill this back up with fluid. All modern forks use 5-weight. Don't call and ask me or email me what brand or what weight. All of them use 5-weight. I don't care what brand you use. I use Maxima here. Silklean's good. Motorax. There's a lot of good brands out there. You decide. So fill this thing up about 3/4 of the way. It's not a pre-measured amount. It's not a volume. So just fill it up 3/4 of the way. After you fill it up, then you want to stroke the spindle. So the shaft here, you want to stroke it up and down a few times. You'll feel air in it at first. It will move very easily at first, and then as the air gets out of the system, it will get a heavy drag to it. That means you got most of the air out of the system, not all of it. And if you look down inside here at that point, it'll be full of air bubbles. So from there, you have to let this piece sit. I've got clamps here to hold it on the wall, or I can just clip it on the wall and let it sit for a few minutes. You can come up with something at home, fasten it in your vise, hold on to it, whatever you want to do, but this needs to just sit still for about 10 minutes until all the air bubbles get out of there. Alright, so now at this point, this is over full with oil. And I want to continue to have it overfilled until we get farther down the road here. So these bladders, when you first take them out, they're distended. They're fully distended. So collapse it. Squeeze it and get the air out of it so that it's partially collapsed. After that, you need to hold it over an oil tray or something. I've got this pan, this bench pan here. And then you get up here. And then you're going to want to drop this in. And you want to have enough oil in there to where it overflows as you push it in. That way you're not getting more air in there. So after that, you're ready to tighten this down. You can use like a blue compression tool like we sell. That's the same thing. This is a custom made tool here. Then you want to clamp it in the vise. It has these flat sides right here, and that's a good place to clamp it. You should have soft jaws so you don't chew it up. These are aluminum jaws. If you don't have those, you can put some wood blocks in there or rags or something to protect it. Put it in your vise. Don't get carried away, tighten it down. It's made out of aluminum, you can break it. I'm doing this stuff all backwards so that you can see it on the camera, so it's a little bit clumsy here. And then there's 2 screws in this fork cap. There's the outer one, that's where the air bleeder valve, if you put in speed bleeders, or if you just want to bleed the air out manually, that's what you use, is that outer one. We're concerned about the inner screw, the one that's closer to the knob here. So if you turn the knob, it will actually cover it part way up. So pull that out. There's a little O-ring on it, don't lose that. So from here, now the system is overfilled with oil. It's because the bladder is collapsed, there's more oil in there than there should be, and that can create harshness. So first thing we have to do is take the bleed screw out here. This takes the 2.5mm Allen. I have this pretty level in the vise here, and I'm going to take this tool with the needle. It's just a little pump. It just goes up to 2 bar, which is a little over about 30 pounds, 29 pounds or something. We will be selling these soon. So this needle has to go in this hole, and it's got to go in quite a ways. Sometimes if you go in a little crooked, or if you're not in the center of it, it will go in part way and stop. You'll feel it'll stop hard, like you just ran into metal, because you did. But it needs to go in almost the full length, then you know you're in there all the way. So if you watch this bleed hole back here, you'll probably see some air come out. I'm going to put a 1/2 bar in here, which is about 7 pounds. Now sometimes it squirts a lot of air out, sometimes not. Alright, so the reason I did that is now I've distended the bladder. It's in its proper position now. So I'm going to pull this back out. I'm going to put the bleed screw back in. Don't ask me about torque. I'm sick of torque questions. Just snug it up. And then now we're ready to put the correct amount of air in the bladder. Now, the reason why it's not a big deal to use air in a bladder versus nitrogen is because forks run very cool. You can always touch a fork, and they're so huge, they're out exposed in the air, they're air cooled basically, they always run cool. So the whole purpose of nitrogen in a shock absorber on the back of the bike is shocks run extremely hot. If you touch a shock after you've been riding a while, it'll burn your hand. And nitrogen is much more stable with heat. With fork, it's really kind of a non-issue. Is nitrogen better? Is it optimum? Yes. Is it totally necessary for the home tuner? No. So, use this little hand pump, and now I run 2 bar in them. And I'm going to actually put a little more than 2 bar in here. I'm going to go a couple pounds over 2 bar. Reason is after I stroke this spindle down here, it's going to drop the pressure because the final bleeding process I'm going to do here. So it's a little over 2 bar now, and this is the bleed valve right here for the fork. This is where the fork equalizes while you're riding it. So from there, I'm going to go to the opposite end down here, and I'm going to push the spindle in. So I'm going to push this spindle in. First I'm going to tilt this down to where this is higher than this end. Now I've got all the air, or not all, but most of the air is probably up here where the bleed valve is. I'm going to push this in, and you probably just heard some air bubbles come out. So I'll do this 3 to 4 strokes, that's it, do not go more. There's some more came out. Sometimes a lot of air bubbles come out when you do this, and that's okay. That's what you want. This just has a few. I'm on my 3rd stroke. That's really fine now. I'm going to go 1 more anyhow. So now it's bled properly. It's ready to put back in the fork tubes. This is done. When you first pull one of these out of your bike, I'd recommend that you stroke this spindle and see. Sometimes this will shoot 10 inches up in the air because there's so much pressure built up inside here. That's what makes the forks, or not the only thing, but that's one of the things that makes these twin chamber forks get very harsh. So if you go back and check the pressure now here with this needle and the gauge, you'll see that it's dropped below 2 bar because I want it between 1.75 and 2 bar. So if I would check it right now, because I've stroked it a few times and I've let some of the oil out of it, it's dropped down. Well, now you're thinking, well, every time I hit a bump the pressure is going to go down, down, down until I have nothing there. No, that's not true, because this sits in another chamber which has pressure in it as well. So these equalize, they balance. It keeps it from draining itself. There is some what's called recirculation in the system. Ideally that wouldn't happen, but it does. And the oil gets pushed in around the seal, down around the spindle here when you bottom sometimes. So there is what's called circulation in the fork. Anyhow, from there you put your screw back in here, and then you can put this inner cartridge back into the fork tubes. That's all for now.